Welcome to the Healing for Male Survivors podcast. This is a podcast for male survivors of sexual abuse and assault, whether as a child or as an adult. Know that you are not alone and the abuse was not your fault. My name is Mike Chapman. I'm a certified recovery life coach and also a survivor. Let's find hope and healing together. And welcome to the Healing for Male Survivors podcast. I'm your host, Mike Chapman, and with me today is Scott McKellar from Australia. I'll introduce him in a moment. And we normally record live, though because of the time difference, we have a special recording to get Scott on. Let me introduce Scott. Scott McKellar is a 54-year-old man from Australia and is a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and bullying. He currently works as an Uber Eats driver and does volunteer work with men dealing with mental health issues. So, with that, we start the episode like we do most episodes with 4 questions. Now it's time for 4 questions, that part of the podcast when we get to know our guest a bit better by asking a few questions. Let's go. So, Scott, what is your favorite food memory?
My favourite food memory is getting biscuits and putting icing on them and Smarties and jelly beans. It was like those face biscuits. I used to love making those when I was a kid. My grandmother showed me how to do it.
Yes.
My mother did, but I haven't done it for years. I should try it again.
Wow. Yes, it reminds me, we used to make cinnamon toast as kids because we weren't allowed to cook, but we could use the toaster. So yeah, you do, big thing in the U.S., you smear butter on toast and then have sugar mixed with cinnamon.
Wow.
As cinnamon sugar, and you shake that on top of the toast and then it melts into the warm butter and
Cool.
gets all gooey and cinnamony and buttery. And yes, that's a common similar snack that kids would make, and we did that all the time as kids. See, cinnamon toast. Yes, excellent. So what is your favorite Christmas or holiday memory?
Probably the year that we had Christmas at my house. It's the only time that my in-laws and my parents have been together at Christmas, and we had some relatives of my wife there as well. It was just nice. Instead of having to travel, it was just nice having a Christmas in our home. But we were only living in that house temporarily, so it was the only opportunity we ever had to host Christmas at our house. That was back in 2011, and then the next year we had Christmas. My aunt, we'd been estranged so many years and reconciled. So we had Christmas with my aunt the following year, and that was really nice.
Excellent. Any particular memory that stood out about either of those events?
Probably the fact that we were able to reminisce about old times.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that I was able to get that. It's one of the. See, often my daughter, her grandparents are often not together, so seeing them all together in the same room was very beneficial for her. And it was also, we had my nephew over, and it was the first time my nephew had actually been over to my house. He was only 3 years old, and he really enjoyed himself. It was also an opportunity for my wife's elderly uncle to get out and about, because he was quite a bit older and fairly socially isolated, so it was a good chance for him to get out and about and mix with other people. My wife's aunt was living with us for a while.
Uh-huh.
And the following year, I think it was a lot of healing, because there was an uncle who was estranged, who said some unpleasant things, and they were divorced, and I was able to reconcile with my aunt and cousin and talk about old times and be friends again. And I'll always be grateful for that we did reconcile. That was really good.
Okay. And what is your favorite church or house of worship memory?
I grew up in a Baptist church, and the day that I was baptized, age 21, I met my wife. You see, Baptist churches don't have infant baptism, they have believers' baptism. And that was a special day for me.
Right.
It was the day that I reaffirmed my faith in Christ and met my future wife, and I was really blessed. And there was a elderly gentleman called Malcolm who had really helped me through a bad time about a year before, and he had cancer and was dying, and he made a special effort to get to my baptism. It was the last time I saw him, but he was like a mentor to me, so that's another special memory. seeing Malcolm for the last time, bless his soul. And
Very nice.
that day brought a lot of healing for me because I've been through some bad times, and it just brought a lot of healing for me. It proved to
Right,
me
yeah.
that
I was similarly baptized in a Baptist church. And yeah, that was a very profound time for me as well. I think I was like 16, 17. I
great.
think, yeah, 17 when I was baptized. And yeah, very important because, yeah, it didn't come from a church background. So yeah, that was very important for sure. Continue.
I was abused on a church camp. And that day I thought, well, God is bigger than the individual. So that brought a lot of healing from that experience.
Right.
Anyway.
Right, understand. Now, what is your favorite scripture or any inspirational quote that has helped you on your spiritual journey, and what about it speaks to you?
There's a song called "It's No Longer I That Liveth, but Christ That Liveth in Me," and it's really helped me realize that it's my Christian faith that's helped me through difficult times, and it's also helped me realize that God is bigger than the individual. I guess there's actually this, and the other one is when in the book of Matthew, when Jesus says, "He who takes the least of these away from the kingdom of God will be better if you put a millstone around his neck and cast himself into the ocean." It means that any abusers, that God will deal with them on judgment day. It's not up to us to deal with it. God will deal with them. God is far bigger than individuals in the church. So that's what's really helped me.
Yes, I understand that's actually favorite scripture verse for several of my guests that I've had on that rings true. So that has become a favorite verse of several. I think maybe your fourth or fifth who have been on my podcast and shared that as their favorite scripture verse. I think it's actually in the Gospels. I think at least 3 out of the 4 Gospels, I believe.
Yes.
And yes, so that's extra important when it repeats. So yeah, for sure. So with that, let's go on to your story. And like a lot of our stories, they can jump the timeline from current to past and present and several back and forth.
Yeah.
I know mine certainly does. So wherever you need to go, and you can get as deep as you want. We do have an E rating for explicit content. So if you just don't get too graphic.
No, I won't.
And cursing is fine as well if you need to. But yeah, would love to know about that. And then your healing journey, what you've tried and that has worked, and what you've tried that has not worked.
Yes.
And then what you're doing now.
Okay, well, I was first sexually abused age 6 in a park while looking for cicadas. A young man approached me and said there were ways of looking for cicadas. He took me into a into a park, and he molested me. That I didn't tell anybody, didn't tell my parents until I was 14. A few weeks later, I saw 2 teachers having sex in an art room, and I went to the male teacher and said, well, look, I saw what you were doing, and the young man did oral sex to me. I saw you doing the same thing. So the male teacher took me into an art room, and he molested me in the presence of a female teacher, who banged my head against a wall and said, "You're just a girl." So that's why I started self-harming as a child. I used to bang my head against walls. I got a callus on my forehead. Used to hit myself in the head.
Wow. So back to the park story. How old were you again at the park?
6 years old in 1976.
Wow. And then how old were you when you saw the teachers and this thing happen with the teacher?
That was a few weeks later.
Wow. So you're still 6. Wow.
So,
my goodness.
And around about that time, I made some presents for family members that were seen as not good enough, and the family cat died in an accident. So that was a pretty awful few weeks, and that's when the rot really set in for me. Then
So who passed away
the cat,
in an accident?
The family cat.
Oh, your cat. Wow.
Yeah, sorry, I need to slow down. The family cat died in an accident at Christmas time, and I still have a photo of me with that cat on my mantelpiece.
Wow.
I told my parents about that abuse when I was 14. I feel that the young man may have been a victim himself. He was very gentle. I never saw him again.
This is the teacher or the guy in the park?
Guy in the park.
Okay.
Now, the teacher, there's something about him I'll get to much later on.
Mm-hmm.
Then 4 years later, I was indecently assaulted by a group of young men. There was a squash bowl and swimming pool, and the pool was too small to be supervised by a lifeguard.
So you would have been age 10 around this time?
Yes, I was, yes.
Okay.
6 young men ripped my bathers off and threw them up onto the edge and wanted me to get out of the pool naked to put my bathers back on. I believe this was more an act of bullying and intimidation.
Right.
My brother had a brain-acquired injury. He couldn't do much. And 2 female adults were present and did nothing. I was crying. Then one of the men said, "Come on, he's had enough," threw the bathers back to me. And he gave me a look as if to say, "I'm on your side, but I'm outnumbered." Then I got out of the pool. My father wanted to call the police. I was upset and wanted to go home, which we did. My mother comforted me, and my father said, "Next time we go back to the pool, I will come with you." He said, if you don't go back, then they really have one. I did go back to that pool. I never saw those young men again. Now, this may sound irrelevant to some, but it means something to me. I saw a spiritual healer in the mid-90s who had a vision of the men and said that some of them had tried it on somebody older, they'd been bashed, and that those men now live in fear of me coming back. That means a lot to me. It resonates with me. It doesn't surprise me. I reckon they got their own back. People like that often do.
So about how old were you were 10. How old were the 6 young men?
Early 20s.
Oh, okay, so these are young adults.
Yeah, bastards. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, picking on a 10-year-old. What a man, eh? Unbelievable.
Wow. Yeah.
So, like I said, I believe that they would have got their own back. People like that often do. They try it on somebody older, and then they get bashed. So hopefully they learnt their lesson.
Right.
I believe that they are ashamed of what happened, or most of them are, and every now and again they think of me and they're frightened that one day I'll come back. So I believe that I've got my own back in that sense. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
I went to a school, a boys' school, where my brother was in the same year level as me. He was kept down a year because of his asthma. It was a private school, and we were bullied a lot.
This is not the one with the brain injury. This is a different brother.
I've got one brother. It's the same brother.
So he's got a brain injury and allergies.
Yes. And asthma, yes.
Okay.
So
asthma.
So we started going to the same school in 1980 in grade 5. The private school, who I won't name on air, they had a grade 5 intake. So my brother had fallen from a disused cubby house as a boy and suffered the brain injury.
Yes, what we would call a treehouse in the US.
Yes.
Okay.
There was a boy there who knew Brett from kindergarten, and to spread a rumour that I had pushed Brett out of the treehouse, which I did not do.
Wow.
Boys being boys, for the next 9 years, all I heard was, "Yeah, pushed your brother out of the treehouse." It was horrible. And then another boy from Brett's primary school, his sister knew Brett. So then this other kid turned up and he started it as well. So I was being teased by boys in my year level and younger boys as well. And even though Brett left the school at the end of year 9 to go somewhere else, I was still being teased about that right up to when I finished school. And even after I left, I'd still get boys on public transport taunting me about it. And
wow,
that's despite the fact that one of the boys who started the rumour, his younger brother defended me. A staff member at the school defended me. Several boys who teased me got detentions from a teacher. The boy from the younger year level, I saw him in 1992 and he apologised for what happened. I don't think he meant for it to go as far as it did. In 1989, I saw one of his friends who was taunting me, so I challenged him to a fight at the railway station and he turned and walked off. Coward. Because I had had enough. Awful, horrible stuff. Now, my brother is a child abuse survivor as well, so I've been able to support him.
Okay. Now, you were talking about when you first got into that private school,
Yes.
grade 5 intake meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you left off from there.
I went through to year 12. I went
Okay.
through to year.
So did anything specifically happen at that intake meeting or not? Yes.
Well, I'm just getting to that. I was sexually abused by another student. I was bullied a lot at
At the
that
same
school.
school.
At the same school, yeah, the private school. Another student
Okay.
sexually abused me on 4 occasions.
So you're probably around age 11.
I was 13. He did it to me on 4 occasions. I believe he was very close to a teacher, and I think they might have been in a relationship. I'm not sure. But that student physically and sexually assaulted me for 9 years. He was a horrible person. And subsequently, he ended up a convicted pedophile in adulthood.
Wow. So you said 9 years. So from age 13 into you being an adult.
I was at the school for 9 years because I stayed back a
Oh, you were
year.
at the school for 9 years.
School for 9 years. I stayed back a year, and he sexually abused me on 4 occasions and a couple of times in front of other boys. So I reported that abuse in 2016, and this student was charged. However, the charges were withdrawn because he was under 16 at the time. He was the only perpetrator who had charges laid against him.
So did they even remove him from the school while you were there?
No. He went all the way to the end.
Wow.
I told nobody. I was too scared.
Wow.
He was a horrible person. For example, I was this scrawny little kid back then. You wouldn't believe it now because I've put on a lot of weight. But for example, he used to call me a spastic. And once he leant me up against the wall and got his hand on my jaw where the pressure points are, put all his weight, and then he let me go, and then he smacked my head against the wall as hard as he could. There was a school play where he was the stage manager. And when I walked in, I said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "What are you doing here, spastic?" And he hit me really hard and really knocked me out. He sexually abused me 4 times, twice in front of other students who stood there and laughed or were too scared to say anything. He was a horrible person. I never want to see his face again.
Right. Understand.
Now, I was molested 7 times in 9 years. When I was in early 1983, I was with a church-run organisation for boys. Again, because of pending legal action, I can't name them in the podcast. So we'll just call them the boys group.
Okay.
So the boys group I was in for many years, and I actually became a leader for a while. In early 1983, during a game, they had flower fights, and a group of boys gave me a mouthful of flour and a punch in the guts for no reason. He said, "After what you did, you deserved it." I don't really know what I'm supposed to have done wrong, but what I do know is that I was molested that night by 2 of the leaders, and a third man turned up who worked for the education department and knew my parents who were teachers and made certain threats about me. This guy was never interviewed by the police, so I can't say too much about him. He's now dead. The other 2 pedophiles silenced me. I said nothing to anybody. I said nothing for 17 years. When I reported the matter, one of them was interviewed and denied the allegations. Both those pedophiles went to jail for other offences. The first guy, who's still alive, the media caught him on several occasions working with children in a comic shop, and at one stage he owned a toy shop. The media put him out of business. The other guy committed suicide in 2019, and this is where things can get really mixed up. I met someone who was a fellow survivor on Facebook and tried to help this guy. However, he proceeded to ask me and other people to lie to keep this guy in jail. And this other survivor, who's really a professional victim, he stalked me on Facebook and falsely went around saying that I enabled pedophiles. He drove me off Facebook. So there were some survivors out there, I call them victims, who, instead of trying to heal, try and lash out at others. So one thing I won't be doing again is jumping in and trying to help somebody like that, because it can turn. That was in 2017. Now, the guy who committed suicide, I was very glad when he died. Apparently, he would have gone to jail a second time, and he wrote a letter saying how awful the world was. He got some tablets and washed it all down with a bottle of whiskey. So that was the end of him. I'm glad he's dead. So that's all the times I was sexually abused. Eventually got into an arts degree in urban studies, which is like town planning, but there are no
Okay.
jobs this was back in 1992. In the state of Victoria, the incoming Liberal government announced they were going to merge all the councils. Urban studies is like town planning, so they weren't taking on people for local councils. There was nothing. There was also a recession, which Australians will describe as the recession we had to have, described by the then Prime Minister Paul Keating. So there were no jobs, there was nothing. I came out of university and was unemployed. So I ended up taking what jobs I could. In my adult life, I always struggled with employment. I had to take whatever jobs I could find. I didn't realise I had cognitive disabilities. And because of my mental health issues, there were jobs where I'd be there for a few days or a few weeks and they'd get rid of me, or I'd say the wrong thing at the wrong time. I was always being screwed over by people. I've been married for nearly 30 years and have a daughter in her 20s. I had grandparents I got on well with. So I had to take menial jobs. I was in the cleaning industry for 35 years, what in America you would call being a janitor. I had several business ventures that failed. I seemed to get in with the wrong people. I've often been ripped off. My grandmother gave us her house. The family came to an arrangement. I was talked into doing extensions with a flexi mortgage account. I couldn't hold on to a job. I bought a cleaning franchise and got ripped off. Our daughter came along. We got in too much debt and were forced to sell a house. I was left with nothing. Then subsequently, I don't get on very well with my in-laws. They're very, very money orientated. In downtimes, I soon found out who my friends are. I've friended the wrong sort of people.
Now, you mentioned the cognitive disabilities. Do you think that was from some of the abuse? Because of it got quite physical for several of those.
Yes. So I have cognitive social function, where the filter between the brain and the mouth isn't very good. I have oppositional defiant disorder, and I also have schizoaffective disorder, which is schizophrenia and bipolar combined, and I also have PTSD.
Right.
I have never been known when to walk away or when to stick up for myself. Something very bad happened when I was 17, I forgot to mention. When I was at school, I was talked into repeating year 11, which should never have happened, but I did. Then what happened was the curriculum had all changed and was all different. And in the last week of the third term, these boys, I saw them at a local pool, were teasing me. And it was a put-up job. One of their little friends I didn't even know came over and taunted me. I grabbed him by the neck and told him where to go. He wanted to fight me. So I'm this gangly 17-year-old, and he's this 13-year-old who wants to pick a fight with me. He was a boxer, and we were fighting near a curved drain. And I didn't intend for it to end up in a fight, but it did. And I stumbled on the edge of the drain, looked up, and he hit me. I fell awkwardly, banged my leg on the edge of the drain and broke my fibula, cleaning too. So the next thing I remember was being carted howling across the school ground. He got away with barely a scratch. In hospital, 10 weeks in plaster, all for what? Nothing. But I'm happy to say he broke his ankle on a skiing accident the next week. The poetic justice. But that's probably the worst example of me being vulnerable. And all my life I've been bullied in the workplace. I've been screwed over money-wise. I've been a target for all kinds of people. In my 30s, I was blackmailed by somebody. I was led to believe I'd committed a crime under the influence. It was a guy who was a real con artist. He blackmailed me for 7 years and took $100,000 out of me.
Wow.
He died.
Okay. You had mentioned disclosure when you were talking to your parents.
Yes.
Well, after the events happened, how did that go? And then when, you were married, when did you tell your wife? How have you been able to disclose the abuses to others? How did that go?
The one when I was 6, my parents said, "We wish you told us." They only know about the one at the church. I haven't told them the other ones. It's probably too much for them. The one when I was 10, they said, well, did they touch you? Well, that's why my father agreed to come with me. The one when I was 13, my father was devastated because one of the pedophiles was a friend of his. Dad had no idea. Mum said, well, these things happen. Now you need to get past it. Turns out mum and dad are both child abuse survivors. I'm suing 3 institutions for child abuse.
Okay.
I can't say who they are because it's yet to go to trial.
Right.
And Dad said, well, good luck with it all. Mum said, well, I'm sorry to hear it happened, but there's nothing I can do about it now. She seems fairly blasé about it all. I hope that answers your question.
Right. And your wife knows about everything that's gone on, or
Yes.
a lot of it?
Yeah, some ironic things. This is really ironic. We had a housemate from hell who I met through a support group. He came with me and supported me in telling her what had happened about the camp. And then this same guy, he turned on me later on. I seem to have been an open book and just made friends with the wrong people and been screwed over. That's one of the things that I won't do. Be an open book and befriend people so quickly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Understand. So what have you done for your own healing now? What things have you tried that have worked and what hasn't worked that you have tried?
Okay, well, you've seen a link to a documentary called Back on Track with Southeastern Cars Back on Track. I've sent you the link. There was a documentary made in 2011, and there were some workshops facilitated by Mike Liu, who wrote a book for male survivors called Victims No Longer.
Yeah, he was pretty much the first book on male sexual abuse, childhood sexual abuse, specifically on males. Kind of a classic.
Oh, yeah. I attended some of his workshops facilitated here in Australia. I made some really good friends. Now realise that going to these, just because somebody else is a survivor doesn't mean they're going to become your friend. I got a lot out of that. I also have been on some Facebook groups, and for 6 years I helped facilitate a group for child abuse survivors. I also helped run an Australian one for 4 years. But what I've learnt again is not to friend people in these groups automatically. There can be personality clashes. It can go pear-shaped. There's also a book called Telling Your Own Story. I sent you the link. Healing Journey for Men.
Okay.
And that is available through Shooting Star Publications. 13 men wrote a chapter in the book. And one significant moment I'd like to share is there was a forum for survivors, and a lady who was a counsellor said, what do I do when a boy comes and tells me things? And the answer I gave was, always believe the child. And you couldn't hear a pin drop.
Right.
I also every year go to the Strive to Be Kind Day in Brisbane, Australia, which is for domestic violence survivors. It's run by the Alison Baden Clay Foundation. She was murdered by her estate agent husband, and her family raised awareness for domestic violence. And I took up art therapy at a men's shed 4 years ago, and I presented the family with three pieces, art pieces. With my art, I've given my art to other people, concept art and landscape art, which I really enjoy. I have been in support groups, but I can't stress this enough. Do not join a support group that is run by a private individual. I tried to join one through Meetup, and a woman who wanted to sleep with all the men made up a story about me, and I was kicked out. Join a group that is run by an answerable body. So, for example, the Mental Health Foundation of Australia have Zoom groups, mhfa.org, or I'm an organiser of a group called Grow, capitalletters.org.au. They also exist in America. They're the sort of things that have helped me. So there's some links for you. For anybody in Australia, if you look up menstable.org, that's a group for men that meet up once a month to share their experiences. And so I hope these links help somebody out there. One final one is parkrun.com. That's a regular recreational activity on Saturdays where you walk or run 5 kilometres. Look, I hope these links help somebody out there.
Yeah, we'll put all these in the show notes. Absolutely. You mentioned a little bit that some of these support groups, when they were led by private individuals. It sounds like they wanted something, or they were exploiting members.
Yes.
In one way or
Yes.
another. So that was one thing that didn't work. What else have you tried in your healing journey that also did not work or was less than successful?
Well, I suppose I've already mentioned trying to be friends with people. I guess oversharing. I've been screwed over. I've had a couple of people who've just turned into horrible, horrible people who've turned on me.
Right.
I'd say oversharing, trying too hard to be accepted, talking too much. Isn't that right, May? He's giving me the thumbs up. My support worker, May is with me today, just for those listening to the podcast. Thanks, dude. He's giving me his handshake. Also, I guess, what else is there? Trying to run around being a people pleaser never works. And just because somebody else is a survivor doesn't mean they're your friend. Don't necessarily go out of your way to help them. If you come around it, bite you on the arse. It happened to me. Yeah.
Right.
And look, I'm sorry to sound negative, but there are those in support groups who are in it for their own ego. For example, there's a lady who in Australia who runs a program for feminicide. And when I went to meet this person, she wanted nothing to do with me because I was a man. There are those who will try and exploit these kind of things for their own ego. Beware of the wolf in sheep's clothing. Now,
Absolutely.
I would like... Mike, there's something that I forgot to mention that I'd like to share quickly, if that's okay.
Okay. Please do.
In the boys group, 1989, when I was a leader, one of the pedophiles was a field officer for this organisation, and he turned up one night with his slimy sidekick, and he was friends with one of my leaders, and I heard them comment about how they'd like to groom the boys and get to them. The sidekick took the boys off to see a movie to groom them. There was a leaders' meeting, and when I objected to this new person coming in, was told to shut up. Nobody at that stage knew that they were pedophiles. There was at that stage. So I stayed up all night with those kids. The slimy sidekick humiliated me and got the boys to chase me, and I went through some absolute humiliating stuff that I still can't talk about even to this day. The pedophile was in his car. I held up a baseball bat to him. If he'd walked in that room, I would have killed him. Said, I'm glad that didn't happen. I stayed up all night with those boys and made sure nothing happened. And then a few months later, the pedophile was exposed, so he was out of the organisation. One of those boys I protected, in a few weeks, is becoming an ordained minister. Praise God for that. And when I told him, I'm getting a bit emotional, when I told him and the other boys, his adults, that I protected him, his response and thanking me for protecting him moved me to tears. So if I was meant to be a leader for one reason, it was to save those boys. Thank God I was there.
Wow. Absolutely. So, in closing, is there anything you would like to say for that survivor out there listening? Any words of wisdom you would like to share? Never blame yourself. Read the chapter in that book under the name Lance McKellar. I've got all my tips there, so never blame yourself. It was never your fault. Put yourself first before others. You can't help others if you can't help yourself. And remember this, always believe the child. Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Scott, for sharing from your heart today, and would love to have you back on. Sure, mate. To let us know what your progress, how you are continuing to find healing there in Australia. And I know we have several listeners in Australia as well. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time on the Healing for Male Survivors podcast. If you would like to learn more about my coaching with Polar Live Consulting, where I provide one-on-one coaching and group coaching, both with a focus on healing for male survivors, reach out to me at polarliveconsulting.com. That is Polar spelled Polar. I would love to hear from you. I want to hear your story. If you would like your story featured on this podcast, contact me via my website. If you like this podcast, please rate and review, because that's how other people can find me, and I really want to spread this message of healing and hope to others. And remember, you are not alone. Healing is possible, and the abuse was not your fault. Let me repeat that. The abuse was not your fault. See you next time on the Healing for Male Survivors podcast.